Okay, so for this first mission, I'm just going to do a simple one. We're just going to be putting a little communication satellite into low orbit, so we can be able to have connection to other vessels that are going to be going to other planets. So now I'm in the vehicle assembly bay, or I'll abbreviate it with VAB. So this is going to be an unmanned satellite, meaning that it's going to be controlled from the Space Center here, so there are no astronauts on there. You can see on the left there I've got a whole list of parts sorted into categories by function. So I've got like command pods, fuel tanks, engines, etc., structural stuff. Just right now on the you can see that top sort of hexagonal gold thing. That's the probe core, and right below it is the RCS wheels, which are going to allow me to rotate it in space without having to fire any thrusters. Right now I'm just trying to find a good way to distance these solar panels from the body of the probe so that I don't have to have it clipping through there. I'm trying to find the right height there. Now I'm adding some batteries which can be charged by the solar panels. All of your vessels that are going to be in space need to have a good amount of electric charge stored so that once the solar panels are on the other side of the planet, you can still have power to the probe and still be able to control it. Right there I'm just adding some little decorational stuff to make it look a little bit better, and you can see it's got the NASA logo on the fuel tank there. Right here you can see I am choosing, or I'm adding a fuel tank there, and I'm choosing the Terrier engine. That's what it's called for this mission. I'm using this one for the upper stage mostly because it just has a good ISP, or a specific impulse, meaning that it basically just has better fuel efficiency. So that helps me get more delta V out of the craft so I can get further with it. Right here I'm just adding a little communications dish, and I'm adding another one right here and rotating it up a little bit so we can get a looks cooler, honestly. What else? You can see all the parts I've placed in the bottom right. So right now it's listing the stages, so you can see all it's got right now is the engine. And now I'm going into the action menu, and what I'm doing is I'm just making it so that I can press one button and it will extend all the antennae, and it'll extract those solar panels up on the front, which will you'll see it when I deploy it in space, but they'll fold out and then widen and rotate towards the sun. So now I am looking to just put a decoupler that will fit the engine right now, which will allow me to separate the lower part of the craft from the top so I can ditch empty fuel tanks. And right now I'm just placing the base of an aerodynamic fairing to protect this thing while we go into space. You can see I'm removing it from my staging there, and now I'm going to put some struts on here to help keep it stable during flight. They do add some weight, but it's sort of necessary at this distance, and the weight is so small that it doesn't really make all that much of a difference. And I'm probably adding more than necessary, but I just want to make sure that this is really stable in flight. So now I'm just making sure that struts are on there good and trying to put them in places that aren't obtrusive, and those will disconnect once I've activated the decoupler. So now you can see me, I'm editing the fairing, trying to just give it as slim profile as I can to make it more aerodynamic. And it'll automatically close off up at the top there, and I'm moving the ship up to the top so I have more room to work with. Now you can see me adding the orbital stage, which on this I'm going to use a less efficient but more powerful engine. This is called the Skipper engine, and you can see as I'm adding more of these parts in the bottom right, it's adding more stages, so I'll need to arrange that before I launch. Now moving towards the main stage. For this one I'm using a big fuel tank because this is going to we're probably going to expend probably about 60-70% of our fuel in this first stage alone. So I'm going to put that engine on there. That's called the mainsail, and it's not very fuel efficient, so you wouldn't want to use it for when you're in a vacuum, but it's got a lot of power, and it's good for sea level flight. On the sides here, I'm adding, they're called solid fuel boosters, and basically, the reason you'd use these in real life is because they're cheap and they're easy to use. There's not a lot that can go wrong with them. So I just added these. Even though they're not necessarily the best choice for the design in real life, they would be the cheapest option and probably the most safe for the people on board. Right here you can see I'm just adding some more structural struts to put on there to keep the thing from wobbling. I'm going to add some more nose cones on there just to make it a little steadier on flight and produce less drag as we're raising. Right here you can see me adding on some tail fins. These are just going to help me stay stable in flight. They can be little control surfaces for me, so you'll see when I'm flying the wings will rotate a little bit, which will help me A, stay on course, and B, turn when I need to. Of course, they're of no use in a vacuum since there's no aerodynamic forces in the vacuum, but I'm just going to put these on here to help my first stage get off the ground a little bit easier. And I probably don't need those wings on the top part there, but I just want to make sure that this whole thing is ready to go. Right here you can see me adding, these are called separatrons, and they, when you attach them, they are basically just smaller versions of these solid rocket boosters. And I don't know if you noticed there, but I rotated that the wrong way so that it won't face, or they'll spin around instead of fly away from the craft, but nothing explodes, so it's fine. So here you can see me messing with the staging a little bit and getting everything in the right order that I want, making sure that this mainsail engine in the middle fires at the same time as these boosters on the sides. And another reason I chose that mainsail engine is because it has gimbal, which allows the craft, it allows the engine to rotate and help me control the craft. So that, in addition to the wings, will help me just stay stable in flight. So right here you can see me, I'm looking for the clamps on the side, there they are, and I had an issue here with the clamps trying to, I'm using symmetry and they're trying to attach to the parent part and not the craft, so it just took me a second to fix that. And I'm placing these towards the lower part of the craft so that it'll just hold it better, and sometimes there's just a glitch with the game, but if you place them higher up and you release the clamps as the ship flies away, it'll cause it to wobble a little bit. So as you can see, I'm just fixing my staging a little bit more there on the right, and you can see at the top right of the screen I've got a bunch of readouts that tell me my thrust-to-weight ratio throughout the flight, the amount of delta V in each stage, my specific impulse there, which tells me the efficiency of the craft. You can also see the cost and number of parts. The most important thing I'm looking there, the most important thing that I'm seeing there is the thrust-to-weight ratio and delta V. So if my thrust-to-weight ratio is below 1, then it won't be able to get off the ground. So that all assumes that I'm firing at maximum thrust. So we're ready to launch. Right, so we're going to be taking off towards the right of the Space Center, as you'll see here, so that we're moving with the rotation of the planet, so that we don't have to waste fuel fighting the current momentum. You can see we're going to want to get off the ground a little bit before we start rotating, though. At this point, we're going to want to very slowly start trying to nose to our right, aiming to be pointing at about 45 degrees at 10 kilometers to help us get a better orbit. And we're also going to be wanting to point as close as possible to the prograde marker that you can see on the nav block bottom there, just to help this craft be able to fly as efficiently as possible and expend as little fuel fighting just the air resistance as possible. And that's why, if you can see, I've only got my main engine at 50% thrust, and that's just because I'm letting these secondary solid rocket boosters, letting them do most of the heavy lifting. And so I'm just keeping an eye on the remaining delta V in this stage, which will, once those two side engines are out of fuel, you'll see it'll flame out and then I'll detach. You can see right now I'm just I hit it a little bit late, but I'm generally wanting to be pointing around 10 kilometers, or 45 degrees at 10 kilometers. And I'm shooting for an apoapsis, which is the highest point in your orbit, to be around 95 kilometers, which is just a safe distance, because this planet's atmosphere ends at around, I think it's 70 kilometers, so I just want to not have to be fighting any air resistance, and this will make sure that the satellite never returns back to Earth, and its orbit will never degrade. So you saw there that I attached those separatrons wrong, and it just caused those engines to spin away, but nothing exploded, so it's fine. Right now I'm just waiting for our apoapsis to raise high enough. You can see those flames hitting the sides of the fairings, and that's why we put it inside there. It's just to protect the fragile satellite. And that's a flame out from our main engine, and we will separate, and that will fall back down to Earth and crash into the ocean. And you can see I'm opening my map here and creating a maneuver node at my apoapsis and dragging out my little prograde marker there until our periapsis appears, which is the lowest point in our orbit. And generally speaking, you want your apoapsis and periapsis to be as close as possible. So I'm shooting for around 95 kilometers. And 95 kilometers. I didn't get it quite right, but I think I got it close enough. And there you can see me deploying the fairing. It's just excess weight, and it's not really getting me anywhere, because even though we're not technically out of the atmosphere, there's so little air resistance that it hardly makes a difference. So right here, you can see me, I just warped up to my apoapsis, and I'm now burning an prograded apoapsis, which is going to raise my periapsis. We're moving on to the skipper engine now, which is much more vacuum efficient as compared to the mainsail. And so I don't think we're actually going to end up expending all the fuel in this stage, but there's a reason for that. We got to. So here you can see our periapsis is about to appear on the other side of the planet. There it is. And I'm going to cut our burn as soon as those apoapsis and periapsis markers start to rotate. Now I went ahead and, even though there was still fuel in that, I decoupled the node, and this is just the satellite and the small engine now. Now I did this because even though we still had fuel in that last engine, it was a bit too powerful to make these small precise burns easily. And you can see here in a minute, right now I'm just making that maneuver node to try and circularize my orbit a little bit. And right there you can see I'm lowering the thrust on this engine to just 10% of its maximum thrust, so I can get a really precise burn. And here we're going to be warping to my periapsis and burning retrograde so that it will lower my apoapsis until it can be roughly equal to my apoapsis. I think I get it around 500 meters off, but that's pretty close. So you can see I'm just telling it to point to the maneuver node that I made there, and I'm waiting for it to tell me to start. And as you can see, it's just going to be a little tiny, you can't even hear it burn. Yeah, it's just a little tiny orbit. And so now we're in orbit. We're deploying all of the communication dishes, and you can see the solar panels rotating to face the sun better there. Had a little glitch there with the AI. Looking for the sun. There it is. And so it's just doing this so that it can receive the most energy and power the probe just by being able to recharge the batteries fastest. So that's putting a satellite in low orbit. I hope everything made sense. Maybe, I don't know if I did this too fast or too slow, so just let me know when you email me back. I'm thinking next week I'll try to do a mission to Minmus, which is one of the smaller, it's one of the two moons that orbit this planet. And the entire scale of this is about 1/8. But anyways, I think that's about it. See ya.